Good morning, and thank you for joining us for ASC Connect 2020. I'm Denise Weirs, Director of New Economy at the Alberta Securities Commission, and I am honored to be the moderator for our second panel this morning, Fostering Technology, Innovation, and Capital Formation in Alberta. It looks like from the poll results, we have some nice diversity in our audience with innovators, investors, professional advisors, and academics and government. Our last panel discussed some of the big picture issues involved in addressing Alberta's economic recovery. With this panel, we want to spotlight some of the diversification efforts that are going on in Alberta in the areas of technology and innovation, and discuss capital formation in the space. We'd like this session to be something of a bridge, bringing together those that traditionally participate in our capital markets, our public capital markets here in Alberta, with those on the ground in the innovation space. And to that end, we have three principal objectives for this morning's session. We hope to provide a sense of some of the steps being taken, both by government and the broader innovation community, fostering the development of technology-focused business here in Alberta and catalyzing that growth. Second, we'd like to help provide the audience with a bit more insight into the type of innovation actually occurring here in Alberta, real meaningful innovation, and consider the areas in which Alberta can leverage off of its existing advantages. And third, for the entrepreneurs in the audience, those interested in financing their technology ventures here in Alberta, we hope to provide a bit of a sense of their options, where they might find the money needed to develop and scale their business. We have an amazing panel, one that I think can really help provide a broad spectrum of perspectives. I know they will provide us with a better sense of what's occurring in Alberta and hopefully inspire us to even more. Our panel this morning includes Dan Balaban, CEO of Greengate Power, a company engaged in wind and solar generation, and including what I understand could be Canada's largest solar facility. Brian Fileski, he is the chair of Intergen, a fairly recently formed fund and a technology platform, bringing together senior professionals and entrepreneurs. Laura Kilcrease, CEO of Alberta Innovates, the provincial crown corporation known as the province's full-service innovation engine. John McKenzie, he's the CEO of TMX Group, the parent company to a number of significant capital market participants, including the Toronto Stock Exchange and the TSX Venture Exchange. Alice Reimer, site lead at Creative Destruction Labs, Rockies, the Alberta branch of one of the world's premier venture scaling programs, transitioning ventures from innovation to massively scalable businesses. And Christina Williams, she's the CEO of Alberta Enterprise Corporation, the Alberta Crown Corporation spurring the growth of the venture capital industry in Alberta. Thank you each for agreeing to participate today. Before we begin, I should mention that we will be taking questions. If you'd like to submit one, please use the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. The questions will be collected, and we hope to have two opportunities during today's session to take questions from the audience. So my introductions were quite brief. I'd like to give each of you panelists a chance to share with the audience a bit more about the role you're playing in the innovation space in Alberta. Alice, perhaps we can start with you. You're a successful technology entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur in your own right. And as mentioned, now site lead at Creative Destruction Labs, or CDL, Rockies here in Calgary. My understanding is that CDL is a nonprofit, and the website describes it as an objectives-based program for massively scalable seed stage science and technology-based companies. Can you unpack that a bit? How does CDL help entrepreneurs, and what gap is it trying to fill?
Very good. Thank you, Denise, and delighted to be here this morning. Let me start with our mission. So the mission of CDL is to enhance the prosperity of humankind through the rapid scaling of science-based companies with a new approach to business education. We really work to bridge the gap between basic or what we call fundamental research and the effective commercialization of deep science and technology-based companies. It's about moving from invention to truly through to innovation, where we have the opportunity to recognize the economic, the social, the environmental impact of early stage companies, if you will. Where what CDL is what we call a marketplace for business judgment, the kind of judgment that is hard earned, if you will, from entrepreneurs who have started, founded, exited, operated businesses of size and scale. And in fact, we rely on those entrepreneurs to help with what we call the transference of that judgment to our early stage ventures. And we do that through our objectives-based mentorship program. It's really about helping our entrepreneurs separate the signal from the noise, and so that we can get them honed in on what are the things that they need to do every day in order to move their business forward. As an early stage entrepreneur, particularly if you're coming out of a post-secondary institution where you spent a lot of time working on your technology or your science, there can be so many things that you need to work on. And so our mentors, through our mentorship program, help you just get rid of the noise. The other thing that's unique about the other thing that we do at CDL is we're one of the very first programs. We're part of, actually CDL Rockies is part of the Haskayne School of Business at the University of Calgary. And we're one of the first ever programs that actually has MBAs do real work for real companies that have real outcomes and real impact. For an MBA education, the Harvard Business Case Reviews are the gold standard. And CDL, the MBAs actually go to work for companies, and they will work on real projects that will have real impact. So that's what we do at CDL Rockies.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned that you work with the MBAs from the university. Are the entrepreneurs coming out of the universities as well?
Yes, so we recruit ventures from all over the world, but our program is really best suited to those that are coming out of post-secondary institutions where there's been years and in some instances millions of dollars of R&D or basic research that's been done, and now's the opportunity to move them from to help commercialize that technology.
Okay, great, thank you so much. Okay, Laura, can you give us some insight in what it means to be in the Alberta Innovates being the province's innovation engine? What role does Alberta Innovates play in supporting innovation?
Well, thank you, Denise. As Alberta Innovates, we look at innovation across the whole spectrum, from the earliest stages in the post-secondary of the ideas coming out there, through to commercialization, through to the startup of new companies, the scaling of those companies, and then also helping larger industry where we need to solve real life applied problems today. So we provide this flow through investment and expertise as we support post-secondary researchers, entrepreneurs, and companies of all sizes with tailored suite of programs, services, and business expertise for them. So we bring together these extensive networks, connecting the clients with the right resources at the right time, including facilities and on-site test, scale, and validation ideas, validating ideas with prototypes where necessary. So as we look across the whole research and innovation player landscape, what we're trying to do is reduce barriers, increase adoption, start and scale businesses, and spread innovation across all economic sectors in the province, regardless of the industry. You know, as we provide this technical expertise and advice and support, we also provide some funding, but that funding is non-equity funding. In other words, we will get in at pre-seed and seed stage, perhaps before the free investment market will come to the table, to get something up and running such that someone else can do adequate due diligence and see some reality to that innovation there and who potentially might be a customer. That end-to-end focus gives us a very unique perspective on also industry's biggest challenges. And so while we're stimulating the startup community to build new technology and drive new ideas and support the development and growth of SMEs, we're also looking what the large companies need and trying to stimulate their adoption of innovation and research. These supports, as we look at them across the system, come through a number of different mechanisms for us. Some of you may be familiar with our technology development advisors, who are senior business advisors supporting SMEs with knowledge in knowledge-based industries on a one-on-one coaching basis. Others of you may be more interested in our regional innovation networks, other support areas. We have many, many different programs, and I can't go into them today, but our 19 entrepreneur programs alone have proved that for every dollar we've invested in an early stage company, we've generated between $23 and $30 of outside investment. Similarly, for every dollar we've put in, we've got over $7 in revenue growth within that entity. And last year alone, we created over 2,300 new jobs in the province through that activity. But I think what's even more encouraging is almost 48% of those SMEs that never exported before are exporting by the end, which is really telling you we're getting to the customer. And I think that's so incredibly important. So partnerships and collaborations in what we do are key. With people like Alice and everyone on this panel, it's going through that system from idea to concept to prototype to a business, to a scaling a business, to making it a big business or helping the business do what they need to do in the innovation space. So at the end of the day, we measure our results in a lot of different ways. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an overview of Alberta Innovates.
Wow, that's great. I think I should have asked you what you don't do. It's easier to answer. Okay, Brian, you are co-founder and chair of the Intergen Initiative, and from what I've seen, an individual with a true passion for revitalizing the Alberta economy.
Right.
My understanding is that Intergen was born out of the top 7 out of over 70 gala, with the goal of bridging a gap between our experienced senior talent and young entrepreneurs. Can you tell us a bit more about the role that Intergen and Intergen Connect are playing?
Yeah, thank you so much, Denise. And I just should do an initial shout out to you and the ASC for hosting this function despite the challenges of the COVID virus. And needless to say, your subject of Alberta recovery is vital to us all. And so thank you for asking about Intergen. Intergen is just one of the many fine initiatives, such as Alberta Innovates, Alberta Enterprises, A100, the Blockchain Embassy platform, Now Invest in Alberta, that we're blessed to have in Alberta, working together to make a difference, to really build up and substantially expand our innovation economy. And because they're so complementary and because we're so cooperative as a community, we can do it boldly and we can do it aggressively, as the Premier has said we should do in his recovery statement in June. So you're quite right. Intergen was born 3 years ago. It was an outgrowth of the first Top 7 over 70 awards gala. It was inspired by the magic of the venerable Jim Gray. And we had over 800 people at each of our 2 galas. Each gala recognized 7 remarkable people over the age of 70 who started a business or started an initiative after the age of 70, and it was extraordinarily successful. It celebrated the talent that's there in our more senior community. It gave us an intimate appreciation. There's thousands of talented people, sadly, on the street in Calgary who are underemployed or underengaged. And we felt this was a huge positive opportunity for us to take this painful picture and turn it into a benefit for the community, to develop and deploy this huge human resource to help the imperative of developing our innovative economy. So we took action, and the game plan was, let's deploy these remarkably talented seniors to mentor, provide connections, perhaps financial resources to the burgeoning entrepreneurs and enterprises in our community. And I pause to mention to you, as you may know, that many studies, the Kauffman Foundation being the leader, has indicated that if you connect a senior talent with a younger entrepreneur, there's a 65% better chance of success of that enterprise. So as you know, with that motivation in mind, we went out and we raised $3 million to start a program to connect senior talent with young entrepreneurs, and to do so in a big and friendly and aggressive fashion. And we thank the World Bank, we thank Western Economic Development for the funding. And we want to underscore that this online connectivity with seniors and companies is for the whole community. And if you're at Builders, you're at Yale, you're at Thin Labs, you're Harvest or wherever, and you're looking for a mentor for your particular enterprise, you can go on our site. You can find one that meets your need, that connects with a particular company that you have in mind. And Bob's your uncle, you're connected, and you've got a resource of a person who's talented and passionate about helping out. So it's kind of like a Plenty of Fish dating site, Denise, but it's for the tech community. Okay. And we're pleased to say that our website, the Intergen website, has had some terrific marriages, and we're looking to have more marriages as time goes on. Intergen also has an education program. We host general education events and conduct skills development programs. And we've assembled a hell of a fine team with Sandy Gilbert and Marcy Kraft and Emily Worley. So talk about empowering women. We're overpowered by women doing a hell of a job. In addition to our matching program, in addition to our education program, we felt it would be imperative to establish a fund, a unique fund, an equity fund that would show to ourselves and show to Albertans that we can sponsor growth companies post-startup, pre-scale up, who've got revenues in the $1 million to $1.5 million, that they don't have to leave Alberta. They can stay Alberta, they can grow in Alberta, and there's capital for them here. And thanks to the citizenship of so many visionary families in Calgary, they came to the table. We raised over $7 million for this fund for scale-up companies. And then Bless Synovus and Suncor, they joined us as JV participants in the energy technology side. So we're a mighty little effort, and we're also very fortunate to have Marty Reed, one of the best fund managers in the world, managing our fund, and we've achieved some very proud results.
That's great, Brian.
Very quickly, on the matching side, we've matched, we have about 100 enterprises registered. On the one side, we have more than 100 senior talent people registered on the other side. We've held over 45 education events. We've got an attendance of over 1,000 people, and we got 700 people following us on LinkedIn. And the fund has invested in 7 post-startup companies in energy tech and data analytics. And we're now poised to expand Intergen, its matching program, its education program, and its fund to the rest of Alberta. So close, Denise, by saying a big thanks to our board, to the gazillion number of volunteers and people who have been inputted, the cooperation we have from the innovation community. And together, we're excited about making a big difference, and we look forward to making a bigger one in the near future. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Brian. You know, we hear about the growing senior population and the implications of that. It's tremendous to see that that's kind of turned on its head and turned into a real advantage. So Thank you. Dan, let's turn to you now. As CEO of Greengate Power, you are also creating something of a bridge between the past and the future, but quite a different way. We all know Alberta has tremendous sources of hydrocarbon-based energy, but you have some fascinating facts that really demonstrate the natural resource potential in renewable areas like wind and solar. Can you share with us some of your vision for Alberta?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Denise. You know, maybe just very briefly about Greengate. So, you know, what Greengate Power does is we're a developer of large-scale renewable energy projects. And really what we've done is we've pioneered bringing renewable energy projects of scale to Alberta. For example, our first project was the largest wind energy project in the province. Our second project was the largest wind energy project in the country. And we're currently following that, hopefully, with the largest solar energy project in the country. So far we've done about $1 billion of renewable energy projects here in the province, and if things go according to plan, we'll have our next $1 billion under construction next year. So developing renewable energy projects of unprecedented scale in the heart of oil country has been an interesting journey. Our fossil fuel sector is going through a really difficult time, and the energy discussion has become increasingly polarized in our country right now, and I think unnecessarily so. It's been framed in a manner where it's a choice between fossil fuels or renewable energy, and I actually don't think that is true. I think it's an and. In the case of Alberta, we produce our oil very responsibly, and I think we've earned our right to sell our oil into global markets. But that said, we also have a phenomenal renewable energy opportunity. We're blessed in fossil fuel resources, but we also have some of the best renewable energy resources. We have some of the best onshore wind resources in the world. We have phenomenal solar resource. We're the sunshine state of the north. Our solar resource in Alberta is as good as the solar resource in Florida. And despite the fact that fossil fuels will continue to be an important part of our economy for the foreseeable future, we're undoubtedly going through an energy transition, a global energy transition. And, I describe it as moving from molecules to electrons. So we're moving from an energy system that's primarily based today on burning molecules to produce our energy to one where we are creating clean electrons through the use of renewables, transmitting those into electric vehicles ultimately, and providing a clean energy system. It's a transition that's going to take time, and one that I think Alberta has an important role to play in, given some of our natural advantages.
That's great. So it doesn't have to be an either or proposition.
Yep.
That's heartening. Any comments on sort of the relationship between our historical sources of energy and these renewables?
So just like the global energy system is going through a transition from like I termed it, from molecules to clean electrons, our economy in Alberta is necessarily going through a transition, and we're going through a transition where I believe fossil fuels are currently still the dominant industry in our economy. I think it'll continue to be an important segment in our economy for the foreseeable future. But we're transitioning away from it being the dominant part of our economy. And I think we need to really seriously look at, leveraging this strong industry that we have and the wealth that we've created in this industry and the wealth that will continue to be created in this industry, and leverage it to ensure that we can, diversify our economy into other areas, particularly in clean energy and renewable energy, where I think we have a phenomenal opportunity in this province.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, John, I'd love to hear from you now. You have fairly recently taken on the role of CEO of TMX Group, and that's a huge group, hugely influential in the capital markets. Canadian Depository for Securities, Montreal Exchange, the Derivatives Clearing Agency, many others, but significantly the TSX and the TSX Venture Exchange. So you have a unique role on this panel. The exchanges have historically played a big role in financing mining and petroleum industries. What do you see as the role of the exchanges in the technology and innovation sectors?
Well, I'm happy to jump right into that, Denise. But first, let me thank you for having us today. As mentioned before, it's so important that these panels continue to happen, that you're doing them virtually. And it couldn't be more timely given the importance of both recovery and growth in the marketplace, and what all of our different organizations can do to support that. So back to the core of your question, TSX and TSX Venture, these are something we're really proud of, the history we have here, the place in the world. And for years, these marketplaces have been the leading marketplaces in the world for resource companies, both the energy sector, the mining sector. We have led the world in terms of listings and financing, and from junior cap to senior cap. So we really will operate from a position of strength there in the marketplace. But I think as we transition more into terms of talking more about innovation companies, some folks forget that the fact that the reason that we've been so successful in these sectors is because we've built an ecosystem in the marketplace that supports growth stage companies. So an ecosystem that involves the legal community, the investment community, both the dealers and the investors, a unique set of exchange rules, and a unique set of proportional regulation from a security standpoint allows us to take companies public at a very early stage. And that is key for innovation companies, just the same way it has been for early stage resource and energy companies. On that, the innovation franchise now, within TSX and TSX Venture, this is the fastest growing segment on the exchange. And if you asked me this question 3 years ago, only about 5% of our company mix was innovation companies. And today that's closer to 20. So just in 3 years, we've gone from 5% of the mix to almost 20 of our 2,500-ish public companies. It's a growing segment that's getting bigger every day. And I think it's when we were in the early part of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, I think people like myself also thought, volatility in the market's going to be making really challenging for companies to raise public money on the marketplaces. And what we've seen after the market stabilized so much has actually been quite the opposite. And we're having one of the most robust IPO pipelines on both the senior market and the junior market across Canada and in every province than we've had in probably a decade. And very much driven by renewed strength in our resource economy again, but also the demand for new and innovative innovation companies that are responding to COVID-19 in amazing ways, some that are building off of the needs of the new technology landscape, be it payment companies or healthcare companies, but again, also life science companies that are working on PPE or COVID-19 vaccines. So the fact that our marketplace can actually finance all these different parts of the innovation franchise, I think is really key to the both recovery and growth going forward.
Great, thank you. So using your sort of ecosystem and transitioning it into the innovation space, that's great. Okay, Christina, let's hear from you. As CEO of Alberta Enterprise, you oversee a government-funded fund that in turn invests in private venture capital funds. And as the minister mentioned earlier this morning, the Alberta government has allocated another $175 million to Alberta Enterprise. Can you tell us a bit more about the thinking behind investing into the venture capital funds rather than directly into the technology business and how that works best in facilitating the ecosystem, the venture capital industry in the province?
Hi, Denise, absolutely, and thank you for having me today. So the fund-to-fund model has really now been considered a best practice, and it's used across Canada, both federally and provincially, and it's also used in several other different jurisdictions across the world, including Sweden and New Zealand. So it's a very well-used model. When the Alberta government decided to set ASC up as a fund-to-fund model, they had a task force engaged, and they also engaged a Harvard professor named Josh Lerner, and he's an expert in how should governments get involved from a policy perspective into the venture capital space. And the recommendation was to use a fund-to-fund model. And there's really 4 reasons why there's a fund-to-fund model used versus direct investment. One of them is, core one is to leverage the capital. So by us investing in venture capital funds that then in turn invest in companies, we leverage up the amount of money that we can offer to or create access to for Alberta companies to a much greater extent. So we know, for example, right now that for every dollar we've invested, there's been $4 that have come back into Alberta companies. So we're actually getting our dollar back plus another $3. So, which is great. So the leveraging up is one. The other one is around creating access to more than just the capital. And I usually talk about smart capital and I talk about 4 M's. So it's creating access to money and markets, mentors, and management talent. So these are early stage technology companies, and they need a lot more help than a later stage company would do. So we want to make sure that we create that access to those 4 M's so the companies can stay and grow here in the province and not have to move to get access to those resources. So by investing in VC funds that have that, we can actually import that to the province. The third reason is really to make sure it's market-driven decision-based. So the venture funds are the ones making the investment decisions. We don't. So they are incentivized both on the upside and downside to make market-based decisions. And also we're co-invested with other financial investors and other corporate investors that are driven by other things than kind of economic development goals that we have. So that enables that market-based driven approach. And the last one is a very efficient way to run it. Not a lot of people realize, but we're actually a mighty team of 5, but we get a lot of stuff done with our team of 5, and we get it done through our VCs and through the community that we work with.
That's great. Thank you. It's very helpful. All right, Laura, let's go back to you. With everything you're seeing at Alberta Innovates, could you give the audience a bit more sense of the type of innovation that's occurring in the province and maybe some color on the types of industries that are your primary focus at Alberta Innovates?
Yes, absolutely, Denise. So as I make surmise from earlier on, we're from cradle to moonshot in terms of looking at innovation. And Alberta's natural strengths we look at in many different ways. We look at them from a perspective of data, from digital technologies, from clean tech, and many other pivotal technologies that we think can apply across any of our industries. I'll specifically mention a few at the top of my list today because I think they may be interesting to the viewers. Number 1, artificial intelligence. Alberta Innovates has been investing in our research universities and now in the commercialization of artificial intelligence capacity in this province for 19 years. Why is that important? We believe that artificial intelligence areas such as machine learning and reinforced learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence, where we can be a leader in the world in this area of AI. You know, when I say a leader, we're already recognized as the 3rd best in the world in machine learning. What does that really mean for business? It's estimated this could be up to $16 trillion in the global economic output using artificial intelligence over the next decade. Let's bring this down to home a little bit. What does that mean to local communities? It means artificial intelligence can boost GDP in local economies by up to 26% over that same period. And here in Alberta, we estimate the use of artificial intelligence through the many functions like AMI could in fact by 2025 increase our GDP by just over $1 billion, can employ another almost 6,000 people directly, and actually can attract or start at least another 140 new companies in this province. So this is why I mean we should take a share of that $16 trillion market. Second is innovative hydrocarbons. We often think of our oil sands as being our source of wealth, and they have been, but that's not going to stop. Instead of burning the hydrocarbons, we have other uses for them. I like to call one of our programs Bitumen Beyond Combustion. Let's not burn the material. Let's take out of our hydrocarbons high value materials that can be very helpful to us. What am I talking about? I'm talking about non-fuel products like carbon fibers, asphaltenes, polymers, and even precious metals such as vanadium for flow cell batteries and things like Brad might be using in his clean tech area. You know, this is an opportunity that's very vast. Today, the market in North America for carbon fibers, if they were available, is over $230 billion. We believe within the next few years, we could actually, from these type of products out of bitumen, actually gain another $84 billion of exports in Alberta. In addition to that, we have bitumen partial upgrading, where we can free up 1/3 of our pipeline capacity. And that's estimated by the University of Calgary, where we can upgrade the bitumen. It could actually generate another $10 billion in GDP, again, over the next 20 years. And then there's other things like solvent-assisted SAGD, environmentally better, cheaper in the process, and it lowers the use of both steam or water, as well as using unique chemical processes we develop. Many more, but understand our hydrocarbons are not a business of the past. They are a business of the future. Third, smart agriculture. Advanced sensors, remote monitoring, automation, blockchain, tracking food. You know, we're so fortunate. Canada is the 7th largest exporter of food in the world, and we still have 1 billion people that aren't being fed. Our agri-food business is an economic driver with 75,000 Albertans today. Let's bring it into the 21st century, make it even more productive, increase the sales, and we believe there could be as much as another 28 billion of sales over the next decade here from our farm sector. And finally, I'll just give you my 4th and stop there, digital health. You know, we have the single largest health system in this country. We have our whole population with digital data, and from this data, we can create new models to enable better healthcare at cheaper prices, and also use it to attract new businesses that need some of that data. It's data that's protected, that's safe, that's anonymized. We need this to do this with the other tools like artificial intelligence to make things better for our people while we improve, you know, the market for the internet of the medical business as we go forward. So just 4 examples that I think are very ripe today and how we should produce them. And really, you'll notice how I measure them. I measure them with a B in billions, because those technologies could make that much difference as we move towards our moonshots. Denise?
Thank you. That's amazing. Great. Thanks. All right, Alice, let's go back to you. CDL, I understand, has locations not just in Toronto, Rotman, where it started, and here in Calgary, of course, but that there are 8 locations in total, and that each one focuses on different areas or technology streams. So what's the particular focus here in Alberta at CDL Rockies, and why those streams?
So in fact, thank you, Denise. And you're going to have some common themes with what Laura just talked about, which is probably not surprising. So there's actually 9 CDL sites now across the globe. There's 5 in Canada. There's 2 in Europe, including CDL Oxford and HSA in Paris. There's 2 in the United States. So we have a CDL Atlanta at Georgia Tech, but we also just recently announced a CDL Risk at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in partnership with the American Family Insurance. And that is a stream specifically dedicated to insurance and risk management. So there's actually 15 different themes, if you will, or streams of innovation that we focus on inside of CDL. More specifically at CDL Rockies, we have 3 streams. Our first one is what we call a prime stream, or a general technology stream. And this really works across diverse industries. And so we'll see and help accelerate the commercial potential of technologies in everything from enterprise software, sensors, manufacturing, but also in health and med tech. You just heard Laura talk about our digital health opportunity here and having the single largest health system. We also have, outside of Ontario, the only province of 2 research-intensive medical universities. We have vet school, we have pharmacy, we have speech pathology and physio. And so we have some really unique strategic advantages there on the health side. Our second stream is dedicated to energy. And this is about the acceleration of novel technologies that we can apply to the energy industry's most challenging problems. And so this is things such as resource optimization and management, alternative energy sources such as hydrogen and fuel cells and geothermal. And energy, much like what we have in health, is truly our opportunity to lead in the world. And then this year, pretty excited, we just launched our ag stream. And this is the focus of ag completely across the value chain. We talk about it as being from producer to plate. And we'll see ventures and technologies there in sustainable agriculture, logistics, transportation, manufacturing. And so super delighted. We now have 3 different streams at CDL Rockies, focused in areas where we truly have an opportunity to set the tone and lead the world.
That's great. And that makes sense. You're right. There are a lot of synergies between what you said and what Laura had said. What about the, Laura spoke also about artificial intelligence and machine learning. What if some young entrepreneur in Alberta was interested in that? What can that be accommodated at all?
Yeah, so we truly, as CDL, we're truly a global network. And so we do have, a couple of streams specifically dedicated to artificial intelligence and the technology itself. What's most important, though, is that we recruit globally, we work globally, we look for the very best ventures. We're a highly competitive program. And we look to match and ensure that the ventures are matched with our entrepreneurs, with our mentors who have that relevant experience. The one thing I will say, though, is artificial intelligence and machine learning is now an expectation, if you will. It's becoming a foundational and a fundamental technology. And so we will have a number of ventures across all of our streams, health, med tech, education tech, energy, ag, that will have an AI and a machine learning component, as you can imagine. And so many of our scientists come from AMI and the University of Alberta. So great affinity there as well.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, thank you. Okay, Brian, we mentioned that Intergen Capital is a relatively new venture capital fund. Are there certain types of technology companies you're focused on, or any that you're quite excited about so far?
Thanks for asking, Denise. What we're doing is just complementary to the good work that Laura's doing, Christina's doing, and Alice is doing at CDL. In fact, CDL is just shooting the lights out, the youngest of the CDL group in the country, and outperforming stellarly. Very exciting. Exciting for the community, and exciting for the students, and exciting for our innovation future. The fund, as we mentioned earlier, was inspired by a number of volunteer families of the view that we have to have money available for post-startups, after angel, after startup, into the growth stage where there's $1 million, $1.5 million of earnings and plus. Is there capital in Alberta to keep these companies here? You don't have to go to Vancouver. You don't have to go to Toronto. You can stay here and grow. There's capital. And moreover, there's not only capital, but there's mentorship to support you, an invaluable resource. Just as an aside, Marty Reed, who runs Evoke, said to us when we were talking to him about coming to the Intergen Fund and managing it, he said, I can't believe that you've got a website that registers talented seniors on one side to be matched with innovative companies on the other. My challenge, while I see many, many companies, is the limitation of my Rolodex. I can only call upon so many people so many times to give me a hand. But if I can go to a website and I can identify at that website people with talent and interest and passion for the needs of my particular companies in my inventory, that's fantastic. So in the result, this chap with international credentials, with responsibility for hundreds of millions of dollars of fund management, said, I will manage this fund, and I will do so on a very, very modest basis, fee-wise. So to answer your question, we've invested in energy tech, 3 companies. We've invested in health tech. We've invested in a lending platform, data analytics, legal technology, and the like. And in every case, we've preyed upon our mentor resource to provide guidance. In some cases, go on the board. In some cases, be chairman of the board to help these companies mature. And we're excited about what they're achieving. We're also very indebted to the fact that on our board, we have the likes of Mark Blackwell, James Lockery, Trent Johnson, Phil Roberts, Heather Culbert, and advisors like Alice Reimer and Lorraine Mitchmore. So we have a coterie of extraordinarily talented people who, together with Evoke and Marty Reed's talent, we can make very, very thoughtful and diligent investments. So we've got those 8 investments now. We're looking to expand our fund to 10 million, plus the strength of Cenovus and Suncor investing with us is really exciting and very powerful. And we share with Cenovus and Suncor that, like the defense industry in Israel, where they develop technologies in the defense industry and then they transfer them laterally out to a myriad of different applications, the energy technology industry is absolutely a wealth of opportunity for lateral transfer of technology. And part of our investment modus is to just invest in companies that are energy technology but have lateral applications.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks, Brian. All right, John, let's go back to you. As the head of TMX Group, you're going to have quite a national perspective, I expect, on the public venture space. As you already sort of mentioned, we are unique in Canada when exchanges focus not just on funding but the largest companies, but also some of our earliest stage ventures. How do you see the exchanges, and maybe particularly the TSX Venture Exchange, assisting with capital formation for these innovation-focused companies?
Well, it's a great question, and it's so timely, especially when you think about what's happened and what we've seen in the market and the environment throughout this year. And so I'm going to stay away from the merits of private versus public equity, but recognizing the fact that all through the early parts of the year, when it was challenging for companies to get debt financing, or there was challenge in the private market, the public market is always opened. And even though there was actually some calls in media and otherwise early in the year that we should shut the markets down, allow them to take a pause, we were very steadfast on that. Public markets need to remain open, and they actually provide that liquidity and funding ability for companies to get things done. The uniqueness around TSX Venture, just to build on a little bit though, is it's really a hybrid market. So about 85% of the financing that gets done in venture is actually private financing on public exchange, private investment in public market. And it gets done that way because it's a vehicle to bring that private capital on the market. But for the companies and the investors behind them, it really gives you the public market benefit of integrity, because these companies are vetted, of transparency, the way you don't see in a private space, and liquidity for investors, for founders, for employees, shareholders, and for future investors to come in. So it really is a unique value proposition that way. We recently recognized, this was the second year doing it on the TSX side, the TSX 30, and these are the top 30 performing companies on the TSX. They represent 3% of the issuers. 12 of those companies this year were originally TSX Venture companies that started as small cap, grew with us, did capital raising over time, and eventually graduated to the senior market. So it's a real critical growth vehicle for the Canadian economy in every province. And what I'm going to pivot and talk to a bit about is the Cpc program, so the Capital Pool Company program. And I did see on the Q&A already that there is some questions about that. This is a program that actually did start in Alberta. And as I said, this is our flagship funding program for small cap companies that allows founders and investors to stand up a company and then reverse in a new business to help it grow and go forward. We have been working really hard with the industry on how we make this a better program and how we modernize it for 2020 through industry consultation, working with regulatory partners. That's actually been really well advanced. So at this point, what I actually can say for folks that are interested is that we are actually getting close to a modernization of that program that will allow for bigger deals, new investment in it, and things like that. And we are just still continuing to work through that regulatory process and operating agreement process of finishing it. The other piece that I'll hit on quickly though is one of the things that we've recognized, in recent terms, given that our unique position in terms of being the operator of these two great marketplaces, we're in a position to be a champion for Canadian capital markets. And our ethos every day is what can we do to help make markets better? So advocating for public markets is something that we're going to be doing a lot more of, and we have been doing it throughout this year. When we talked at the beginning about kind of private markets versus public market, you'll see that everything that we're going to advocate for is ensuring that public companies aren't facing incremental barriers to raising capital that private companies are. And so focusing on reducing regulatory burden, advocating for changes in our own rule set to make it easier for companies to come to market, to rely on disclosure documents they've already created, to allow for electronic disclosure tools. So we're advocating for our rule changes for ourselves with input from industry, and we always want more input. So anyone that's participating today, please, continues to send us those ideas. But we'll also use our platform to advocate at the government level as well. So we pushed very hard earlier this year to ensure that the emergency wage subsidy applied to public companies and not just private as it was in its initial format. Because let's remember that most of our public companies in Canada are still small and medium enterprises. So they look like a lot of private companies, and we ought to make sure they have those same supports. Similarly, last year, we advocated for ensuring that private and public companies were treated fairly and equally if there was any change coming in stock option taxation. So we'll keep pushing those kind of themes to ensure that public companies can be successful that way.
That's great. Yeah, no, I know that I hear quite often that the research and development tax credit differentiation has implications for companies that are looking to go public. So that sounds like a great role. Look forward to that. Christina, you're back. I know at Alberta Enterprise, you are really tracking the development of technology-focused business in Alberta. Are you able to share any statistics with us or any trends that you're seeing?
Absolutely. So over the last 10 years that we've been involved in this industry, we've seen a steady increase of the number of technology companies in the province. Every couple of years, we do a deal flow study. So we try to find out how many technology companies are there in the province, what stage, what sector are they? And we've seen a steady increase. In the last go around, when we did this in 2018, we had about 1,200 technology companies that we identified. And we're about to launch into our next deal flow study. So stay tuned for that one. One of the trends we're seeing, if we're comparing ourselves to some of the other ecosystems in Canada, is we're a relatively young technology sector here. In our last deal flow study, we found that more than 50% of the companies were what we classify as pre-Series A. So this is prior to an institutional investor coming in. Over the last number of years, and compared to the deal flow study we did prior to that, we saw a 10-point increase, though, in the maturation of the companies. So companies that now are scaling their products had a 10-point increase. So we're interested to see how that's going to work out in our next deal flow study to see if we have further increases in that. Also, an interesting thing that I like to point out is in 2019, we had the largest amount of dollars, venture capital dollars invested in Alberta since we started measuring 10 years ago. There's been a over 200% increase, which is spectacularly good. But, and here's the but, we're still punching below our weight. And this relates partially back to that we're such a young technology ecosystem. So we have relatively young companies, so they have relatively smaller dollars that they're raising. So on a national scale, therefore, we're still, there's still room for improvement. We're seeing a lot more what we call mega deals. So these are deals that are done with more than $50 million worth of investment. And we've seen a couple of them coming. So Decisive Farming was one, Cement, Drywise, and not to mention the $1 billion acquisition of Solium by Morgan Stanley. So it's coming. So we'll see how that moves forward. Another major issue has been underreporting. So one of the initiatives that we helped start together with a whole bunch of other partners is something called startalberta.com. And it's an open source portal where companies can go in and they can put in their information, and investors can go in and put in their information. And there you will be able to track the investment rounds, et cetera, so that we get better data, because the data has been one of the issues. We also saw one of the interesting trends, and one of the questions brought that up actually, and I wanted to point that out, is that in our last deal flow study, we saw 30% female co-founders or founders of Alberta tech companies, which is twice the national average, which is something I think we should pat ourselves on the back for. So we have been very focused on trying to help with diversity and inclusion overall. And as an industry, I think all of us are now highly focused on those topics. And we're starting to see more and more female investors on senior investment roles, which I think truly helps. We're seeing more female angel investors invest, including through the 51 and other organizations. And some of our VCs have now senior investment roles are filled by women. And we're seeing a lot of our portfolio companies also have women co-founders in them, so which is greatly positive. And we are working very hard to connect female entrepreneurs to investors, and not just female investors, but to investors in general, because it's such an important thing, and especially here in Alberta, with having such a high representation of female entrepreneurs.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, I think we're going to move to take an audience question now, and we have one here for Laura. Let me see. Thank you, Christina. It says, Laura, could you provide more concrete examples of new business opportunities and explain where their funding comes from?
Yeah, Denise, absolutely. So let me just randomly pick a company, but one I think is exceptional. And that's a company in Calgary by the name of Atobotics. And let's kind of go through that life cycle a little bit. And again, great kudos to the founders of Atobotics. But if you go back to when they started in 2015, it's a couple of people trying to make something happen, having an idea. By 2016, we saw what they were trying to do, and we allocated a technology development advisor to them who started working with them. More importantly, we gave them what we call a micro voucher, a small grant to actually patent their technology. And that was absolutely key, because if you don't own your IP today, you own practically nothing. And we wanted to make sure as they went forward, they owned that IP here in Alberta. We followed that up with another grant to build a prototype of their product, then to pilot demo their product. And then we gave them a commercialization grant, along all this time with help from both the technology advisors and the greater network. Many of those are the people affiliated with associations on this panel today. Ultimately, we got their first customer by 2018, and this allowed them to go raise private money in the marketplace. And here that private money was a combination of federal through Sustainable Development Canada and your own local OSEF. And between the two of those, there were several million raised, allowing Atobotics to take the product forward into the marketplace. But they found they needed to adapt that product, as so often happens with alpha products, for additional environments. And so back in 2020, we gave them a further grant to be able to adapt for new markets. That has enabled Atobotics doing such a good job to first raise a Series B of private equity at 25 million. And then more recently, in the last month, they've raised a Series C, which was 50 million US, 73 million Canadian. Now that's what I say, cradle from something tiny without a patent to now it's really on that fast track with just under 200 employees. And so you can see a mixture of non-equitable grants there that help get them to the point that the private markets, through my colleagues here, could actually come in, but they needed a lot of help that went with that. Again, one of the great stories I look forward to seeing in the second half of 2020 is one of the big deals for Canada. And so I give you just that as an example, but there are many others like that that we can help with specifically.
Well, thanks, that's helpful. Brian, we have a quick question here for you. So you have been leading and coordinating some efforts here in Alberta, making submissions to the provincial government with respect to ideas to energize Alberta's fintech sector. And we heard the minister speak about the financial sector in his remarks. Can you share with us some of your key recommendations in just a few minutes? I know that'll be hard.
Yeah, it is. Thank you very much, Denise. That's true. About 6 months ago, a group of us in Edmonton and Calgary, technology and business leaders, were seized with the need to provide the Alberta government with practical, implementable initiatives and to put the recommendations in shovel-ready form to better enable the government to implement them with haste. And in the result, we seized upon a study of the models in the world that were most effective practically in terms of transforming an economy into an innovation economy. And that took us to a global consultant, McKinsey & Company, and they did a 150-page study on the best experiences around the world, including Singapore, Israel, Denmark, Austin, Texas, Detroit, Cleveland, and the like. And so with the benefit of that study, which we pause to say, they provided it to us, 150 pages, a myriad of meetings, totally pro bono. They were seized with the passion of this volunteer group. They were seized with the need in Alberta for the innovation of our economy, and bless them, it took our breath away. They provided this intense study with an army of people for gratis. So it was an invaluable resource from that. And from that resource, we determined what were the most opportune initiatives we could bring to Alberta to help in an implementative way transform our economy. And we're terribly indebted to the input from AEC, from ATB, from a myriad of leaders across the country, credit unions, the Jack Mintzes, the Mac Van Willigans, the Alice Reimers of this world, who are all involved in providing their sage thoughts. In the result, we ended up presenting 9 practical, implementable recommendations to the government. We presented to them in August. We then followed up with meetings with the government in August. And out of that, we're pleased to say that the government said, let's focus on the FinTech recommendations. And we were charged with narrowing our recommendations in that area. In the result, we proposed 9 working groups with, if you can believe it, Denise, we were blessed to have 44 experts in each of these 9 sector areas come to the table and say, we will volunteer our time. Law firms, accounting firms, experienced technologists and scientists saying this is an important initiative for Alberta, we'll chip in. So we have 44 talented people at the starting gate, ready to go. We're waiting for the bell to ring so we can go down the track and help make a difference. The cornerstone of our recommendation, as many of you know, is the Alberta Advantage Fund. And in addition to the good work that Alberta Innovates is doing and Alberta Enterprise is doing, we felt from our studies that what would be additive in the province of Alberta would be a very significant non-dilutive equity incentive fund. What the hell does that mean? It means that there would be a fund which would see the provincial government, the federal government, and the private sector participating to the tune of about $500 million to start off. And that fund would uniquely, the only fund in North America, provide equity, which is capped at 5%. So it's non-dilutive equity. And we've done a hell of a good job of helping build up organically companies in Alberta. Where we now can boost our economy and our innovation is by attracting outsiders to come to Alberta. Israel's done it in spades. Singapore's done it in spades, and on. But no jurisdiction in North America has an incentivized equity fund. We would be the only one. From the venture capitalists and enterprises that we've been in contact with have been inputted, they say that for us to have such an attraction would be a honey pill, a honeypot for enterprise bees across the continent to come and participate in Alberta because of its unique attraction. So we're quite excited about that. We'd love to see it lift off. It's not a small step, it's a bold step, but it fits into the whole attitude. If we're going to do this, let's do it aggressively and boldly and in Technicolor. So we're excited about the FinTech initiatives, including open banking, which we've had great input from ATB, and we have experts across the country to make Alberta the pioneer in open banking. The major banks have been talking about it, but they haven't initiated it. And we in Alberta can do that and be a leader. We can have the repository of expertise in open banking located here in Alberta with our banks and with our credit unions. Likewise, with the wonderful work that the Alberta Securities Commission has done on sandboxes can be expanded so we're the most friendly and most opportune sandbox regime in North America. And it goes on and on, whether it's data access, whether it's international fiscal corporations, whether it's first customer or whether it's fintech prizes and competition. We are so grateful for all the input, all the leadership of so many people collectively to make this fintech initiative a major accomplishment and a milestone profile achievement for Alberta.
Thanks, Brian. That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, well, Brian, thank you. And we'll go to Dan now. Dan, Brian's outlined a number of recommendations that he and his group have. Could you give us a couple of your top thoughts on what you think the province needs?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you again, Denise. Yeah, so, you know, there's a number of good things already going on in the province, but the story's not really being well told. You know, so, you know, over the last year or so, there have been a number of really important policies that the government of Alberta has put in place that are really encouraging renewable energy. So one is the carbon price that are imposed on our large final emitters. You know, there is a disagreement between the province and the feds on carbon pricing on the retail consumer, but the province does have carbon pricing on large industrial emitters. And what that's really done is that's created a domestic market for renewable energy projects, because what renewable energy projects do is they create offsets that large emitters can use to comply under the program. And it's an important part of the economics, market-based economics of renewables. That's a really important policy. We have a deregulated power generation market in Alberta, which is unique in Canada. We're the only deregulated power generation market in the entire country. And it's important that I think we stick with that current market construct because it is currently driving investment into the province. You know, there's a very large domestic renewable energy opportunity in Alberta, and it's really driven by a couple different things, you know, these enabling policies that I described. But one is most of our power used to come from coal. That coal is going to be retired over the next decade and needs to be replaced with new power generation. There's about $10 to $20 billion of new investment required in our power generation sector over the next decade. A lot of that could go to renewable energy, and it could create you know, tremendous number of jobs for Albertans while we go through a construction boom over the next decade as we replace our aging power infrastructure. You know, there's also an international opportunity that I think we really need to consider capitalizing on. There's a whole bunch of resources that go into the clean energy system: rare earth minerals, lithium. You know, hydrogen is an important piece of it. And I think it's really important that we have policies in the province that encourage investment in those sectors so that we can continue doing what we do, which is exporting our natural resources. Currently, it's primarily fossil fuels, but there's also natural resources that we'll need to export to serve the global clean energy economy. And I think it's really important that you know, we have a role to play there. And it's really important, I think, that we tell the story of all the good things going on in Alberta. We're not just a bunch of angry folks that are frustrated with, you know, the misunderstanding of our fossil fuel sector. I mean, that is a legitimate concern, but it's not a good look for us internationally to go out and with an angry message. I think we have lots to be optimistic about, and we really need to tell the good story of Alberta, which is one of prosperity, innovation, and looking towards the future.
That's great. Good insights there. Thank you. All right, let's see here. Okay, we're going to change directions a little bit and talk about money, the question of money. So let's say I've got a venture, I've leveraged the mentorship and training services that I think I might need. I've got my business plan and my marketing plan, and now I need money. I need money to execute on it. Where can I turn? Laura, let's maybe turn to you. You've mentioned some grants and micro vouchers. Is there anything else you want to add in relation to Alberta Innovate's role in helping businesses get access to funding?
Yeah, Denise, I think I'd like to add a couple of things. Number one, beyond the grants, and these are not insignificant over time, I think it's very important at the pre-seed stage that we leverage without external capital. Having said that, we also have a team of people that will introduce companies to capital sources to help them get onto that private market. In fact, so much so in Calgary, from a recent study of all the tech-based entrepreneurs in Calgary, we've actually worked with 63% of all those startup companies in some form or another to access capital, on top of over 500 rounds of vouchers that we've given. So I think when you put it in that context, that's really important. We also work with our colleagues on this panel today, specifically Christina with her VCs and others. And as you look at some of the venture capital market and private equity market players that have been most active in Canada in the last 6 months, even through COVID, we're very fortunate to have funds like Panache here in Calgary that have been very active in early stage. And of course, we refer to people like that, as we do to Inovia and many others wherever they may be bound. So I think the capital intensity for the startups, we're connecting. The capital intensity for larger industries like oil and gas, this is where we play more of a validation and scaling play with our complex solutions. So with our technical leads, we can take a barrel of oil to 100 barrels of oil to 14,000 barrels of oil a day on particular technologies. That applies to clean tech too. So we help in different ways in accessing those folks to capital. Finally, I'd like to say to you, we're always trying to get more capital into the province, more capital into the companies. And so we, in July this year, we put on a program called Show Me the Money. And we brought together for half day in 20-minute segments, a whole load of folks who have money available to companies in the province with partners like Western Economic Diversification, our own Alberta Jobs Economy and Innovation, with AEC, with Intergen, with CRIN, the Clean Resource Innovation Network, etc. And I should not forget Creative Destruction Labs here. We brought them all together into a program in 20-minute segments. Anyone, we're going to make that program available to your viewers today. There's a link on your website and a free pass to get on. And so if you're looking for a particular type of financing, go see what's available. Second to that, and Christina mentioned a very good point, a question from the audience on capital for female startups, which has traditionally been a much less served segment. And I'm happy to say we also had She Innovates with the 51 investment group half-day session in September, and we're making that available to you online as well for those female entrepreneurs who are looking to raise capital. I hope that helps everyone, because that's what it was meant to do. And we really, what I say to you all is, go raise more money. We're with you and we'll support you in any way we can.
Great, thank you, Laura. And to anyone who has not seen the Show Me the Money event, I would recommend it. As Laura mentioned, there's a link on our website to it. And I think it can be overwhelming, the various different entities and sources of funding. So it was amazingly helpful. Alice, let's switch to you. So does CDL have a role in, so there's all these supports that provide, does it have a role in providing capital or providing introductions to investors?
Yes, so first and foremost, CDL is a mentorship program first. That being said, many of our companies will go on during the program to raise, and we actually look to our mentors and to our partners. So that could be corporate partners, it could be VC partners, to in fact, help these companies move through that first stage of pre-seed or, seed stage capitalization. It's important to note CDL does not charge fees, and we do not take equity in the ventures. In fact, we are largely philanthropically funded. and most recently have received some government funding through organizations like Western Economic Development, but largely all of our operations are covered philanthropically. So that allows all of that capital then to be put towards the ventures. So I love to share some stats. So since 2017, when CDL, we got CDL going here at the University of Calgary, our companies have gone on to raise over $75 million of capital. So 2017, 125 companies started the program, 53 of those companies graduated the program, $75 million worth of capital has been raised, 360 million of equity value has been created by those companies. And at last count, there's been over 100 high quality jobs created here in the province of Alberta. And so we have, the impact that we're having both on the capital as well as on the job creation side is demonstrable.
That's great. And Alice, before I let you go, there's been a couple of people who've mentioned the 51. You are one of the co-founders of the 51.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, and thank you to Christina and to Laura for mentioning the 51 and to give us a shout out. So I've had the great privilege of founding the 51 with two other female entrepreneurs and innovators in the Alberta ecosystem, Shelley Kuipers and Judy Fairburn. And we founded the 51 last year in March of 2019 to really respond to some of the challenges that female-led ventures and female-founded companies face. Less than 4%, some numbers say 6% of all venture capital goes into female-led or female-founded businesses, and we need to change that. We also need to have, there's also a tremendous amount of wealth that will be transitioning from, generationally into females, and we need to create an opportunity for those inspiring investors. So we are what we call a financial feminism platform and movement, where we bring together those investors, those entrepreneurs, and those who aspire to be, where they can come together for female-led capital, for female-led businesses focused on mutual wealth creation, jobs, and social/environmental impact. To date, we've got a community of over 7,500 folks, and we've had directly or co-invested more than $6 billion worth of capital since March of 2019.
Wow, that's great. Okay, thank you so much. Let's see here. Dan, let's go back to you. You have had some real life experience trying to find capital in the not too distant past. Can you share with the audience a bit about your experience and any words of advice?
Yeah, sure. So maybe just briefly our entrepreneurial journey at Greengate. So Greengate, truly started with entrepreneurial roots. Started the company in 2007 with my brother Jordan, and it's been quite the journey so far. I'd say it's evolved over time. When we started the company in 2007, well over 13 years ago, renewable energy wasn't as cool, if you will, as it is today. Wasn't as well understood by traditional energy investors. So we really had to kind of cobble together the capital that we needed to execute our plans. We started out as a private company. We remain a private company, and have been able to raise capital both from high net worth investors inside of Alberta and outside. But what we've been extremely successful at doing is developing really large projects that attracted large institutional capital into the province from investors that traditionally hadn't invested in the province. So for example, our latest solar project that we're working on is going to be a $750 million investment in Alberta. Our investor for that project is a Danish-based infrastructure fund called Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. They're the largest renewable energy focused fund in the world. And this is going to be their first investment in Canada in renewable energy in the heart of oil country in Alberta. So, we've been able to find capital from, I'd say, non-traditional sources, but we have been able to successfully tap into what is a tsunami of capital globally that's looking for good renewable energy opportunities to invest in. Like I said, we have a tremendous opportunity over the next decade in Alberta, sourcing international investors. There's a big role that I have to play as an informal ambassador for Alberta, and really sell the merits of investing large sums of capital in this province. I know that with some tweaks, we can see a lot more and even accelerated investment from many international players that are currently looking at Alberta as an interesting growth opportunity.
Thanks, Dan. That was great. Christina, I see you're back. Okay, I understand that in addition to Alberta Enterprise being involved in spurring venture capital investment, it also provides funding to the Accelerate funds, and that those co-invest alongside angel investors into Alberta-based technology companies that aren't quite ready for venture capital investment. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so personally, I have experience working with several technology startups that were in the earlier stage, so pre-revenue or early revenue. So I personally know how incredibly difficult it can be to raise capital in that stage. And from an ASC perspective, our bread and butter is venture capital, and our job is to create access to venture capital through the VC funds we invest in. But we realize that there's, and again, back to the deal flow study I mentioned earlier, that there's so many early stage companies in Alberta, and if we can't get them enough capital to stay and grow here, they might either leave or not make it. So a number of years ago, we realized we had to put some money towards the venture capital or pre-venture capital stage on the angel side, so co-invest along with angels. So we created the Accelerate funds, and we're now on our third one. So the Accelerate funds is there to do more than just the capital. So in addition to the 4 M's I talked about earlier, it's also there to help the angels with the due diligence, to help the angels structure the deals, to make sure that these companies are then ready for VC investment when that time comes around. We've also tied in the A100 to help the companies post-investment with mentorship. So the A100 is a group of entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs that have been there, done that before, and who are now giving back to the community through mentorship. The first 2 funds of Accelerate Fund, so Fund 1 and Fund 2, were $10 million each, $10 million each. They invested in 25 companies, and those companies have now raised close to $100 million, which is spectacularly good. And I mentioned Decisive Farming before. Another company is called Circle Cardiovascular, to give a couple of examples of companies. But now we are into Accelerate Fund 3, and we launched that in May with a $10 million investment. And because of the increased funding that we got from the government, we were able to top that up with another $5 million. So the fund is currently sitting at $15 million. So that fund will now be able to invest in those earlier stage technology companies. And if you're listening to the panel today and you're one of those companies, you can go to acceleratefund.ca and you can find out how to apply and how to get access to that investment money, and who is running it. So it's run by Yaletown Venture Partners, which is a very seasoned firm. They're based out of Vancouver, but they have 2 people here in Alberta. One is in Calgary and one is in Edmonton. And the fund itself will only invest in Alberta-based technology companies.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Okay, John, I guess we will wrap up this round of questions with you. Where do you see the opportunities in Alberta, and what role do you think that the TMX group can play in supporting the innovation space, the growth there in Alberta?
Well, I mean, we really see the opportunities in continuing to remind the world about the strength of our energy sector and the fostering of the innovation sector at the same time. I want to pick up on a theme, and it's a theme that came through another of those speakers already: the importance of mentorship with innovation companies, and that's another role that, as an exchange provider, we take on as well. So in terms of the things that we do to help facilitate in the market, we do a lot of mentorship work with particularly venture companies, because in a lot of cases, these companies aren't yet sophisticated public companies in terms of, what does it take to be public? How do you do good disclosure? One of the themes that we heard earlier in the conference today was the importance around ESG and what investors are looking for in terms of company disclosure. So we recently launched an ESG 101 portal to really help issuers up their game in terms of, what does this actually mean? What are these standards? How do I report against them? And it's an area we're going to keep investing in to help issuers talk to investors in that lens. In terms of specific sectors as well, on the energy side, we've been pushing on some thought leadership, one around how companies in Alberta can diversify in terms of being not just traditional energy companies, but hybrid companies. And we are pushing some new thought leadership around how the market could potentially utilize income trusts again as a way to bring stability and risk capital back into the energy sector. So that's a theme and a concept we're going to push in the industry. And then if I pivot specifically to the innovation sector, there's a number of things. We've been a big proponent for flow-through shares. So flow-through shares for the clean tech sector, because again, this is a sector, very much like the resource sector, that requires a lot of upfront capital. So if we can facilitate it with flow-through shares, we can de-risk some of that investment going into the sector. So we're going to be pushing for that. We actually hosted a TSX Alberta Technology Investor Day this year. So we're going to be active in the tech sector in Alberta. I believe we're also going to be involved in Tech Week in Alberta next month coming up. And then we continue to work hand in hand with tech and innovation companies that are exploring the public option as a way to fund their growth. I'm going to give you an example because sometimes it's actually the successful companies are the best testimonials for what new companies can do. So a great Alberta company called Blackline Safety went public with the Venture Exchange in 2009 through a qualifying transaction with a CPC at a company at that stage that was less than $1 million top line. So very much like the type of companies that we're talking about today. So sub $1 million top line, very much in the early stage. And then throughout its life and its ability to raise incremental capital, if you fast forward to where Blackline is today, over 200 employees in Calgary, global technology leader, for the third year to date this year, 27 million in revenue, just recently completed a $36 million financing to accelerate their growth plans. Listed in Global Mail as one of the top Canadian growth companies with a market cap now of over 300 million. And this is what we're here to do. We're here to help companies that are at that early stage, help them get on the market, utilize that public vehicle so they can do multiple rounds of capital as they grow and grow into those TSX companies later on.
Great, thanks, John. That's excellent. Okay, well, we are running a bit behind here, so we don't have a lot of time for audience questions. I'm looking here at what we have. There's actually one that's relevant to the ASC, asking about sort of raising money. And we actually just recently launched some new content on our website, in the small business section of our website, albertasecurities.com. And it provides some plain language guidance for entrepreneurs and their advisors looking to raise shares or capital. It's not expected that it can replace the need to read the rules or hire legal counsel, but we hope that it will be some helpful content to make the capital raising process a little more accessible and a little less daunting to entrepreneurs. So I guess a question for us. Now there's a question here, and I'm just trying to think who's the best person to put this to. It says the availability of employees with advanced education in the tech sector is key to attracting new economy tech businesses. How do we bridge the apparent gap between tech industry needs and Alberta's post-secondary institutions? The current education focuses on the old economy occupations. So what's the next steps? And Alice, maybe can I pick on you? Do you have any thoughts on that, given your association with the university?
Yeah, actually, I do. I have some thoughts. I have thoughts on everything, Denise. But yeah, actually, I think there's a unique opportunity. I mean, you talk about the statistics in Alberta, and we have some of the highest educated workforce in the country. And so there are a number of programs now being offered, both from the post-secondary institutions such as the University of Calgary, the University of Alberta, that are sort of post-degree certificates or management and masters in technology. But there's also a number of other programs that are out now, such as Evolve U, being hosted and managed through Thin Air Labs, or the most recently announced Digital Technology Hub at SAIT. And so I think that's really what there is a huge focus on talent and talent transition as well, and how we can actually upskill the, some of the talent that's in Alberta. As well, there's a number of new programs, obviously, that are happening inside of post-secondary institutions to match what we need today and in the future.
Great, thank you. All right, well, I don't think we're going to have time for any more questions. We do have a poll that should be appearing on your screen. We're hoping to hear from the audience on your thoughts about what are the most significant things we need in Alberta to foster technology, innovation, and capital formation, and hoping you can leave us with that. I have to say thank you, panelists. I really thought that was excellent. There's just so much information. I wish we had more time, so many insights. And it's not just about money and about cool tech stuff. It's really building our future. So it's inspiring to hear about all the efforts that are being taken. And I really feel like we can make this happen, Alberta. So a thank you to the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and more about your organization. We really appreciate it. I know if we had a live audience, we'd get a great round of applause here, but you just have me. So just thank you. And thank you to the audience. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it. Thanks to our communications team working behind the scenes to make this all come together. So stay safe, everyone. Stay healthy. And with that, I will pass the baton over to our chair and CEO, Stan Magidson, for some concluding remarks. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Denise. And I must say that was just a terrific session, really. The enthusiasm and all of the things happening in the space were really, really encouraging to hear about. So thank you for that. I do hope that you enjoyed and benefited from our program today. Our objective, as was stated at the beginning, was to shed light on Alberta's plan for economic recovery and efforts that were underway to foster resiliency and innovation. I think you will agree there are challenges ahead, but also real opportunities that build on Alberta's strengths and include very bold innovation initiatives. A lot has been said about the resiliency of Albertans and the importance of building bridges. To name a few, Brian Fileski talking about Intergen, you know, an idea that grew out of a top 7 over 70 gala, intending to marry or build bridges, if you like, between experienced, seasoned business people and mentoring them and providing capital to young entrepreneurs. We heard about meaningful project development with First Nations, not platitude, but actual real investments in our First Nations communities that are win-win for Canada and our First Nations brethren. Women in technology, it's happening. We heard a lot about that and the importance that all folks in Alberta can play in terms of our innovation strategy. We heard about natural gas and its evolution to hydrogen. And we heard about building bridges to Ottawa so that we can find win-win policies and strategies, not win-lose strategies and policies, and the importance of that. I was heartened to hear about the sincere efforts underway to grow the Alberta economy and ensure it is an attractive market for our youth, entrepreneurs, and inbound investment. Our future, in other words. They say it takes a village. We at the ASC are pleased to be a part of that village and honored to have been able to convene this conference for the benefit of all of our attendees. I want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your experience, perspective, and insight with us. As a token of our appreciation, the ASC will be making a contribution to the United Way on your behalf. Later this week, we will send out a short survey via email to all attendees to obtain your feedback on today's event. We look forward to hearing your thoughts. And with that, all the best to you. Stay safe.